Can expectations alone make you smarter, or can they hold you back? Can they make you more confident or more timid? In 1968, a psychologist with lab mice and a third grade teacher in Ohio with her classroom shocked the world with the same discovery that expectations can transform performance. Their lessons are just as urgent today because they don't just shape society, they can also be used to improve your life. We're going to talk about it today on Off the Couch. And welcome to Off the Couch with Dr. Greg, because growth doesn't happen lying down. Or should we go back to psychology for everyday life? We'll come up with something. This is Dr. Greg Case on Psychology, here with producer Brian Gomez.
Happy Tuesday, you guys.
And also Tony Sweet on the board. Hi, Tony.
How are you all?
In your remote location. Today on Off the Couch, this is a very special episode. We're going to reach into the past, into some groundbreaking research that may change everything you think about the present. In fact, I was thinking a lot about the present when I reached into this episode, so I really had to look backwards. But let's start with a quiz, just to see where you guys are, if that's okay. This is a quiz, and we're going to talk about what this is measuring. But just answer this as honestly as possible. 5 questions. When you're working with others, like students, colleagues, employees, or even your friends, do you usually communicate your belief that they can succeed? Would you say yes, sometimes, or no? Keeping track, yes, sometimes, or no. Number 2, do you give more encouragement, feedback, or opportunities to people that you believe have strong potential? Yes, sometimes, or no. If someone struggles, do you maintain high expectations and provide extra support instead of lowering your standards for them? Yes, sometimes, or no. And number 4, do you consciously try to spot and nurture hidden talents in others, even when they don't see them themselves? Yes, sometimes, or no. And number 5, after someone succeeds, do you connect their achievement to the expectations that you set and the confidence you expressed in them? Yes, sometimes, or no. Let's go over that. We're discussing a very interesting concept. And I'm going to talk about this. The overall word we use in psychology is actually called the Rosenthal effect. But the way these questions were phrased, actually, there's a branch off in the Rosenthal effect. There's really 3 different, street names for these things. We call this one, when you treat someone well and try to lift them up, that's called the Pygmalion effect. Let's see if you're using it. Brian, what would you say? Are you mostly yeses, mostly sometimes, or mostly nos?
Mine were mostly yeses.
Mostly yeses. Well, you're actively using the Pygmalion effect. Your high expectations likely help others to rise to their best.
Yeah, a lot of the questions, even like the last one and the 4th one, I'm like, oh, I do always look for, like, if I see somebody's talent or somebody that I feel like could do something big in the world, I'm always like, oh, why aren't you like pursuing this? I try to give them little pushes towards it, because it's not like that. I don't just go around saying like, oh my God, you're amazing at this, or I believe you can do so well in this. But if I can see and feel that from somebody, I'm always like, I try to push that for sure.
Good for you. And Tony, what would you say for yourself?
Mostly yeses.
Ah, boring. Okay.
Okay.
And you're an employee. I mean, you're employer, and you've had employees over time. But you've always maintained a positive attitude. I've seen that with you.
Yeah, no, I try to encourage and I try to enhance the talents that some people don't see in themselves. So,
Brian, you've worked for me. What would you say I am?
oh, here we go.
No, you're definitely the yeses too. Like, and especially whenever you see that I'm doing well at something and I try to like go off course or something, you try to always just make sure I'm like still staying with it. Because when you do see something good that I'm doing, you know?
Very good. Thank you. Actually, I had to chide myself on one. Number 5, After someone succeeds, do you connect their achievement to the expectations you set and the confidence you express in them? I often will take myself out of the equation when someone achieves something. I don't think, oh, it's because I encourage them. But there's a reason you probably, for lack of a better word, should do that. Because if you do that and make that connection, you're actually going to reinforce that behavior and keep it coming back. So that is a disconnect with me that I'm going to certainly work on. Because really, when I do encourage people, I set very high expectations for myself and try to work on them all the time. So when I work with other people, I often project my own abilities and stuff into other people. And I'm like, well, if I can do it, you can, because I don't think, that I'm all that anything. And I believe if I can, you can too. What interested me most, though, in doing this was that when I've reflected on my therapy clients, and I've actually thought this about myself. I'm like, I wonder how much people improve with me just because I continually believe in them. And I continually push them and look for the good in them and try to bring that out and get them to focus on that stuff. A lot of therapists will focus more on the problems, and I do want to help them with the problems and listen to the problems, but I've always had a bias towards success in my therapy work. So I've always tried to work with people and focusing on that. And that can provide blind spots, I admit. Because sometimes maybe I perhaps could benefit from spending more time on the problems. But I do often try to help people lean into their strengths and to achieve what they want. And I just had a client who achieved this monumental thing, really monumental, that was 7+ years in the making. That I know I was very much a part of it as part of the therapy. But I mean, I didn't do the work. My client did. All I did was sit there and go, push. You did this. I'm connecting all the dots, here, you're so discouraged now, and it's kind of a weave back and forth.
Yeah, but I feel like without that little thing that you are giving yourself credit for, that client wouldn't have been able to succeed or keep it going or keep it pushing. It's easy. It's so easy. And I feel like, to just give up and drop it or like get persuaded to do something else. Or so I know you may feel like it's not that big of a deal, but honestly, having like those guardrails or tools, I'm pretty sure it's why, that client got to where they are.
I hope so. We'll never know. Because you'd have to do an experiment where that person entered another reality and didn't go to therapy with me, or went to therapy with 3 other therapists to see if he got the same result. I mean, it would just have to be an experiment that we cannot do. So I do believe it because I was part of that process for so long, but I don't know that he would have not accomplished what he did without me. I believe that I was part of it. I don't believe necessarily that I'm the necessary ingredient. I have to say, I'm just being honest. Let's go. If you're you're using the Pygmalion effect, that's great. You're using your high expectations to promote good behavior in others. If you're just sometimes, then you apply this inconsistently, and that's not so good because when you give inconsistent messages, people will they don't know what to think of things, and they sometimes start to doubt themselves. So inconsistent messages can be very bad. And if you're mostly no's, you're not leveraging the Pygmalion effect. You're somebody who might see people as mostly bad or wrong or inept or problematic. And we're going to talk about why you're probably correct. So let's talk about the Pygmalion effect. As I said, it's how I was taught this in school. We were taught that it's called the Rosenthal effect. The Rosenthal effect is an overall effect. It's a psychological phenomenon where higher expectations lead to improved performance. Higher expectations from others lead to improved performance. But we just talked about the Pygmalion effect. When you have high expectations, you have high performance. There's also something that's called the Gollum effect. The Gollum effect is when you have lower expectations that leads to lower performance. That's why somebody who believes that an employee is kind of a screw up is going to keep treating that employee like they're a screw up. And guess what? The employee will keep screwing up. And it will just keep happening over and over again. I actually have a remedy for that. Let's not forget that. I have a remedy for that I talk to clients about, and it is a tough one for them to apply. It is really tough. But let's talk about who Gollum was. Do you know who Gollum is? Nope. Do you know, Tony?
We talk about Lord of the Rings.
Oh, you are correct, but that's not why this is called the Gollum effect. There is Gollum in Lord of the Rings, and what Gollum? He was a little creature who became like a little shrunken self of a man. And what did he always say? Do you remember?
Is it my precious?
My precious.
Yeah, my precious.
My precious. He had that ring. My precious. And do you remember what the ring did?
Nope, I've never watched Lord of the Rings.
Gave him all power. It was unending power. Wasn't that it, Tony? It was like the ring represented just tremendous power. And what's so interesting, that's actually spelled different than the Gollum here. That's Gollum. But this is Golem. Do you know who this Gollum is? This is actually based on Jewish folklore. And that Gollum was this clay creature. Let me back up. Pygmalion was the artist. He made a statue. It was so beautiful, he fell in love with it. And I think Aphrodite brought it to life for him. So it's called the Pygmalion effect because he believed that this statue was so beautiful that then came to life. This is the Gollum effect because Gollum was this little creature made out of clay, and it was brought to life, and it was meant to be a protector of the people. But it got too much power and became destructive. So it started to become a beast. So interesting that Gollum in Lord of the Rings, it was a huge nod to the Jewish folklore story. That was
actually because it started off with the ring. He was just a normal hobbit, and then the power consumed him to this creature. Yeah,
the power consumed him, and that's what happens with Gollum here. And he becomes this not so good creature. So it just gets worse and worse and worse. So it's all a form of self-fulfilling prophecy where your beliefs and expectations influence the behaviors and outcomes of others. I think this is a super important lesson for bosses, for employers, for teachers, and for parents. Don't you? But also for anybody who's around you. So let's just I just want to talk about this study really quickly. This was originated 1968, two psychologists, Robert Rosenthal and Lenore Jackson, wrote a book and published it called Pygmalion in the Classroom. Basically, believing in the children and watching them flourish. But let's just start with Robert Rosenthal. He started this. I have to say this was quite brilliant. He just basically took a random set of rats, and then he took a random set of college students. He divided up the rats and just randomly and said to one group of the college students, these are super intelligent, superior rats who've been trained to run these mazes. You get to work with them. They're amazing. He told the other group of college students, these are mentally deficient rats. Or they're mice. I'm sorry. They weren't rats. They were mice. And they go, these are mentally deficient mice. And they're not going to be able to run this maze. They're just terrible. They're poorly behaved, etc. They were the same mice. They were just divided randomly. What was so interesting is he found that the group that believed their mice were superior actually had better performance in the mouse mazes, in the mazes, than the people who believe that their mice were not performing well.
I mean, it's insane. Yeah.
So then they went, hey, let's apply this to students. So they took it and tried to apply it to the students, and teachers were told that some students, they picked students at random and told the teachers, those students have high intellectual growth potential. They are your special students. And what they found that those randomly chosen students then actually showed greater academic performance. The teachers didn't know that this was an experiment. They didn't know that was the experiment. They were basically being told that they were studying these special students. So they started to treat these particular students, demanding more of them. And then they also saw some students not as good. And what they saw was very quickly that the students that they believed were better improved.
So do you think that's the same whenever, like, in high school, they put you in, like, AP algebra or, like, special classes, or, you were in your gifted program? Like, do you think that has a part to, like, I'm just thinking of, like, oh, well, how does that affect kids in, schools whenever, they're seen like they're not as bright or as smart because they're doing, like, regular classes compared to, like, any advanced classes?
So I talked about this. I talked about this before, and somebody put a comment, because this is the story of me. That basically, I know I had a lot of problems at home, and it translated to me not being a good student in school. And in first grade, I couldn't read. Like, I had difficulty reading. And basically, they identified that I had difficulty. They wanted my mom to work with me. She bought things like Gulliver's Travels and Tarzan books, which for a beginning reader were just way above my pay grade. For years, I looked at those books and I was horrified. Like, I didn't understand a word on those pages. Just because my mom was working full time, she didn't know. She wasn't a teacher. So anyway, I just wasn't a good student in first grade. And then I guess they tested me and I did well. But that wasn't the key. I didn't know I did well. But they put me in a different group of students. And when I was in this group of students, all these students were really diligent. They finished their work first. This is in my second grade class. And they were just, better performers. And I noticed that we were finishing our work first. And then I went on to get tested, and then I went to a special school. When I was in the special school, I was no longer at the top of the class. In fact, I was very much in the middle of the class. But one thing I'll give to the special school that I was in until 8th grade, the end of 8th grade, is that they pushed us very, very hard. They did not let up. They gave us homework. They expected a lot of us, and it was hard. I remember it being hard, and I learned, and I'm so glad I had that experience. I had to read books in 6th grade. I mean, a lot of 6th graders have to read books, but I had to read several books. We always had page counts. We always had to do book reports. We always had to do presentations. We had science fairs. We had this. We had that. And I watch people who were in the regular program, like, in another part of the school, their classes seem so, like, basic. And if I were in those classes, I suppose I would just be coasting along. Thank God I was lucky enough to be put in school, in a school program that really pushed me for years.
But then do you think it's like, I don't know, I'm just thinking of, like, the general public in that sense, where it's like, well, are they getting dumbed down just because they're not getting challenged or having higher expectations?
I think that's part of it. Yes, I think
I can give you an example.
Yeah.
I was also in first grade. I had trouble reading. I didn't have the luxury, because then they end up putting me in special ed. And then they realized I wasn't fit for special ed. That I was not, I guess, on that level. But there was a teacher in the first grade that I don't know if I told you, but she took my book and threw it across the room and pretty much called me stupid. And that stuck in my head for years.
Oh my God.
Years and years. And so, yeah, it took me a long time to come to terms that I was not stupid because of that moment. And it was very embarrassing because it was in front of the whole class. But to have her put me in a special ed class, but then also on top of it, she did that. So it does stick in your head of like, oh, I guess I am stupid and can't learn. But then later on, I'm like, well, no, I just learned differently, but I had a IQ test, and I was high, not overly intelligent, but I was higher than average. So I was like, oh, well, maybe I'm not as dumb as she said I was.
I'm not as dumb as they think.
That's
well,
right.
what's interesting, Tony, is that you're basically illustrating the Rosenthal effect. You're illustrating the Gollum version, the negative version.
Yeah.
That her beliefs, she had a belief that led her to take an action, calling you stupid, throwing your book, which led you to believe that you're a stupid person, and then probably caused you to act more in that way. Like maybe being more rebellious or quiet, not willing to participate, not willing to take a risk, because you need to take risks even when you're a little kid, and put down an answer that you're not too sure about, but you think that's the answer, but you may not put that down, and then that leads to her thinking this kid is just not smart, continues to treat you not smart, and you're on this cycle toward destruction.
And I became I didn't want to volunteer. I didn't want to get in front of the class. I didn't want to answer questions because I questioned
There you
myself.
go.
Yeah.
No, I'm just saying that's sad, especially to a little kid. Like,
you got fired.
It just breaks my heart.
Oh, she got fired.
Oh,
good for her.
Yeah, it wasn't just me. There was other students, but my mom ended up, when I finally told her what happened, my mom went to visit her, and she didn't last long after that.
But what you experienced was the Gollum effect. That's low expectations lead to poor performance. And you just illustrated that for this. We were just talking about the Pygmalion effect, higher expectations leading to higher performance. And what we're all kind of talking about is that eventually that leads to something called the Galatea effect. Do you know who Galatea is? You probably don't.
I know Galilea.
Galilea, different. This is Galatea. This was the name of the statue that Pygmalion fell in love with. Her name was Galatea. And that's that self-expectations drive performance. This also could be the story of Pinocchio. Really. Because Pinocchio, he wanted to be a boy, and he started to act like a boy, and he made the mistakes of a boy, and he loved like a boy. He became a boy. Remember the puppet Pinocchio? Anyway, so, the Galatea's self-expectations drive performance. And what happens is when people treat us a certain way, we start to believe these things about ourselves. Brian, you told me on a phone call that your mother said positive things to you.
Yeah, I'm grateful for that. Like, we don't have like the most amazing relationship now, but as a child, like, I am beyond grateful of how she instilled these self-beliefs into me, to where she always made sure to mention to like always just walk with my head up, don't walk around with your head down. And it just sounded kind of like whatever, sure. But like as I got older, I'm like, wow, the way you carry yourself, the way you think about yourself, like she always instilled that I could do anything I put my mind to. And honestly, it's been such a blessing that I've gone for opportunities and things I've always wanted to do. Anything I've ever wanted to do, I've just done it and gone for it, which is amazing. Like, I wish everybody was brought up that way, just because it's like, as a kid, you should be giving that, you should have received that gift as like that you can, because all of us can do anything we want.
Right. And I would say I was not brought up with that belief. I do though. I think like how did I arrive where I arrived? You know, I in fact was told some things, but what happened, I think that schooling experience did help. Because what I started to see was that, and also I was very much when you have a disabled sibling and I'm a year younger. And so you kind of learn to kind of be on your own a lot. And also, I just started to, in that environment in school, I had to work hard. And in fact, my family would get irritated because I would have homework all the time. I couldn't be doing the chores. I was always, I was a bummer on vacations because I'd bring homework with me and that type of thing. Um, and you actually got in trouble once because my dad wanted to extend the vacation, and it was actually pretty dramatic. I said I can't extend it. I have to get back to school, and he flipped out because the reality was he didn't look at school as important. And I did. And what happened was I developed this belief that I can do things. And I think I really got a strong sense of the Galatea effect because the school placed that expectation on me. It wasn't like any one teacher was even that impressive to me. They were just all kind of laying the work on constantly and saying, you have to do this, you have to do this. And I just had to jump up and perform.
And it's crazy that the school does play a huge role in
Huge.
your development, because when I moved from San Diego to Texas, I remember my math classes. We had so much homework every single day. I hated it. In San Diego, yes. And then we moved to Texas my 8th grade year, and I remember in my math class, we had one problem assigned for the week to us, which seemed amazing, but like in a bigger picture, it's like I'm pretty sure we were losing brain cells. I mean, just like the big difference in like schoolwork, I was like, wow, this is weird. I was so used to doing so much work, which was amazing as a kid. You're like, hell yeah, like no, I don't have to stress out about homework. But you see the effect that happens.
The people who are listening are probably concerned like, wait, you promised that we could use this to improve your life, and I promise we'll get there. Because right now it seems like we have to have other people to say and do things for us to improve. But I want to layer this on with something even more dire that was happening at the same time. This is Jane Elliott. She was a 3rd grade teacher in Iowa, actually Riceville, Iowa. Was I say Iowa or I said Ohio before? I apologize, but she was in Iowa. Created this exercise in 1968. And it was right after Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated. He was assassinated in 1968. Also, Bobby Kennedy was assassinated in 1968, I think a few months later, here in LA. And she wanted to teach the students about discrimination, but she would, like, as you would expect in Iowa, in a rural Iowa town, that what can you do? They're all white students. So she came up with this exercise, which she hadn't put into play. But after Dr. King was assassinated, one of the students said, someone killed the king. And that caused her to think, I want to do this exercise with the students. And this is the blue eye, brown eye exercise. So she divided the students over 2 days into students being blue-eyed and students being brown-eyed. So she could get about half the room, half and half. So let's just say what she did. The blue-eyed students were told that they were superior, they were smarter, they were cleaner, they were more capable. They were given extra privileges. They were given 5 more minutes of recess. They were told that they could use the drinking fountain. She gave them visible prompts to say, well, these are the better students, the blue-eyed students. Then the brown-eyed children were told that they were inferior, and they were given fewer privileges. They were held back from recess. They couldn't use the drinking fountain. The 2 groups couldn't play with each other. And then the day 2, she reversed it. Day 2, she reversed it. The roles were reversed. Previously the inferior group, or the brown eye group, became the superior group. So then the brown eyes became the superiors and were given the extra privileges and got to do everything. And then the blue eyes were then now the inferior group. And to help this, she had them wear collars so they knew from afar which one was a blue eye or a brown eye. I mean, she's really clever. It showed quickly how attitudes and behavior shifted and changes. Now, I actually will advise to any listener to go watch the Frontline special. I put a link in the show notes on the YouTube page. If you go to youtube.com/Dr. Greg and to this video, which is Can Belief Leave You Broken, or I can't remember the name of this. Oh, I forget the name of this thing. Shame on me, huh? It's Can Belief Make You Brilliant or Broken? That's it. Can Belief Make You Brilliant or Broken? And you go to that video and look in the show notes. There's a link to the Frontline special for this episode that is mind-boggling, that was about this 1968 experiment that this teacher did. And she does it brilliantly. And it shows the process of the students. It also shows the students 20 years later coming back and or 30 years, I think it is, and meeting the teacher again and talking about their experience and how it shifted their perspective throughout their entire lives. And then it also shows it being applied to a prison guard population, which I thought was really trippy. So it's a really great expose, but it's all developing. It was all using the same technique, dividing blue eyes versus brown eyes, and her just saying out loud, like with the prison population, she started with the brown eyes. She goes, the brown eyed people are better. The blue eyed people, they made them wait outside. They didn't give them enough chairs. They had to stand in the back. She's like, why aren't you writing this down? You were to write everything down. They didn't have pencils. She chided them at every turn, and it started to make these people really act up in some very precarious and negative ways. And then it started to cause, you could see how the beliefs about the minority group really start to take hold. You watch it, Brian. What did you think?
Oh, yeah. I thought that was an amazing experiment that I feel like everybody alive should experience, like instantly or as soon as they are born or something. I don't know. I think it's eye-opening for a lot of people that have never experienced any sort of discrimination or have truly been discriminated.
Well, what it was interesting to me, well, first let's talk about it. The superior group, no matter who they were, even when they were the superior group the second day, they behaved more confidently. They performed better on tests. In fact, with the kids, she did this card sort test, and dramatic differences on day 1 and day 2, depending on what group they were in. When they were in the smart group, the superior group, they performed much better. When they were in the inferior group, they performed much worse. That held for all the students, all of them. The inferior group became timid. They made more mistakes. They underperformed. The emotional impact was shame, pride, anger, depending on their group status. There was one little girl who said, like, we couldn't do anything right, and the whole day got worse and worse and worse for us. I mean, I just wanted to hug her. Another boy, one of the most fascinating scenes, I think, in the entire video is when one little boy, he got in trouble because he punched another little boy. And he goes, well, he made fun of me. He called me names. And the teacher said, what did he call you? Do you remember what he called him?
What is it, the blue eyes?
He called the kid brown eyes.
Yeah.
He called the kid brown eyes. Brown eyes had suddenly become a derogatory term. Goes, "Hey, brown eyes." And then the guy went up and punched him. And the little kid was so sweet and so honest. Third grade. I mean, just was so sweet. And he's like, she said, and he looked really upset and really angry. And she said, "So you punched him? Did that feel good?" And he paused and he said, "No." She said, "Did that, help?" And then he shook his head, no. Like, even though he expressed violence toward this other person, it didn't help him. All it did was perpetuate this whole negative cycle that he was in. So, why was this significant? It demonstrates that prejudice is arbitrary and socially constructed. And we've got to look at this, that we do this in society. I have another quiz. I'll have it on the handout, which was just basically, do you do this? But do you ever treat some people based on the way they're dressed, the way they speak, the color of their skin, their height, their weight, their body type, the kind of car they drive, the kind of shoes they wear, the kind of people they associate with? Do you treat them as more superior than maybe some other people?
Are you asking me?
Well, I mean, it's something to think about.
No, and it's funny because I knew we were going to discuss this and everything today, and I was thinking about that. I'm like, you know what? I am so blessed, and I am glad I think the way I think. And I also had a big culture shock whenever I moved from San Diego to Texas, too, because I grew up around nothing but white people, and Texas was the complete opposite for me. So, again, I feel like I would have grown up and been racist and just horrible human being if I would have stayed in San Diego. Not saying that, that's the situation, but like it was a culture shock I needed, and I'm so blessed for that. And also the military, I had to work with people from all different parts of the world,
I
and
think the military is very helpful for people with getting to know other people and getting to know other cultures. My uncle, who was a Navy admiral, he really loved Asian culture because he spent so much time there. And he was in Pearl Harbor when the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. And he didn't really have negative feelings toward the Japanese, which was fascinating. He was like, well, it was a war. Like he saw it as a very bad thing, but he didn't blame the people.
yeah. And for me, I had to understand that like the people that I worked around all came from different places, and that's all they've known. Some of them that they've never been exposed to anything other than that small town, that small mindset and way of viewing things. So I had to adapt and learn that they might not just, they're probably not horrible people. They've just never been around so many different things and exposed to different things too.
You're exactly right. And I came from a very conservative area. And I have often said that I could have ended up like maybe the majority of the people I grew up with, who became on the verge of white nationalists. I mean, it's a pretty tough little place. And they just had a neo-Nazi, white supremacy demonstration down by the pier where I grew up. Just had it this past weekend.
And then I'm wondering too, I'm like, is it probably the fact that we're gay and that we
Huge.
do have that's like a big minority
Huge
situation that we stand in?
I can't separate that I had a disabled brother and I watched people react to him and that I was gay. And so I always felt like I was different than everybody else. So that really helped me in the long run, although it was torture as a child. It was.
I bet.
So let's talk about that. This demonstrates that prejudice is arbitrary and socially constructed. It shows how expectations, shape behavior and performance. And hopefully exercises like this build empathy and awareness and bias and discrimination. But you know what? This is part of the DEI thing that they're trying to get rid of. And this shows why it's so important. But you know what else shocks me? I mean, we can go into the ICE raids, et cetera, but how many people now start to look at people who have a Latino accent as somehow less than right now? I wonder how many people in the United States are like that.
Well, I don't think it's just been right now. I think it's just a big big situation
But
happening
it's given it's allowed now.
to people to
It's
discriminate just
oh
from
yeah,
looks.
like
Yeah.
oh of course.
Yeah, and it sucks because being a child of immigrants, I, I almost feel like I, not consciously, but like grew up trying to make sure that I didn't have an accent, that I fit in, blended in. Because as immigrants, you kind of have to do that in a way. You're kind of instructed that you don't want to stand out.
And in fact, if you watch that video, she did that to the minority group. Remember? She told in that particular example, it was the blue eyes who were the minority group. And she said, blue eye people need to learn how to behave. Do you remember her saying, like, she's like, you need to learn to be quiet and wait your turn and write things down.
And they hated that.
They hated it and they pushed back.
Yeah, no, it was just interesting to see how it wasn't even a full hour and they could not even stand being told to wait outside for like 20 minutes. They were already heated by the time they got
They
in,
were.
that you could just see that. I'm like, it's so wild to see that happen to people that have never had to experience any sort of discrimination.
It was something extremely concerning. So you could see how the Galatea effect, which is the phenomenon where self-belief leads to either improved or negative performance, how that starts to take hold. And that if people have negative beliefs about themselves because society treats them poorly and continually treats them poorly, a woman clutches her purse as she walks by a person of color or crosses the street, or or treat someone poorly, or say someone who's obviously understands what you're saying in English and they slow down and start yelling, I'll have the hamburger with. I'm sure she understands.
The one thing I did like about that video too, though, was when they were doing the reunion with the classmates that came back, that although some of them expressed that their kids might still hear or have
Yeah.
racist like stuff, thrown at them from friends or whatever environment that they're in, that some of them were like, yeah, that might be the case, but that won't be happening in our home from us, and I thought that was beautiful.
And one thing you don't know is that particular thing, she went on, after she did that experiment and she got kind of some notoriety, she went on the Johnny Carson show. Johnny Carson show was one of the most watched TV shows. And he was an interviewer and he had her come on and talk about the experiment. I think they showed some film strips, etc. Like they just kind of showed that this happened. She also did an episode of Oprah, a whole episode where they trip people out doing this too. But anyway, on the Johnny Carson show, she talked about it, and the phones for I think it was CBS, whatever, he was on NBC, I don't know. The phone lines were flooded with people calling in, not to say that's so interesting, how great, what a fascinating guest, to say how horrible it was to put white children through that it's traumatic, that black children are used to it, so let them handle it, but not the white children. People really showed their colors or lack thereof, but whatever it was, they were showing some pretty dark sides of themselves, the majority of the calls.
And isn't that crazy that it wasn't even actually something bad or traumatic that they were doing to them?
No, and in fact, all of those kids not only were traumatized, but were grateful for the experience. And you could see that she was really a great teacher, that they went with her where she went,
Yeah.
And I remember being in third grade, and third grade was sort of like here nor there. I think I had a good second grade teacher. Like she was a little more bubbly. I had a dude in third grade, and he was, probably at the end of his tenure. It was a lot of self-directed stuff, but yeah. And then fourth grade, I remember we had one of those very special teachers like she was. So, they do stick out. They weren't special to me. I just was one of 30. And I really appreciated their style. So the Galatea effect is where you start to take on these beliefs about yourself. And remember, it's all a cycle. You go all the way back to the cycle that your beliefs about yourself lead to your own actions, which lead to other people's beliefs about you, which lead to their actions. And you're constantly involved in this cycle. That's why, how do we apply this to ourselves? Well, number one, what would you say? Surround yourself with positive people. Surround yourself not with positive for positive sake, but people who actually push you. That's like if you're at work, ask for more, push harder, try to be better, ask for more work. Really, and what I always give advice to students, like if you really want to do well in school, when the first day, never miss the first day of a class. In fact, don't miss the first 2 weeks, no matter what. I say sit as close to the front as you can. And make it a point to meet the teacher, like make an office appointment or meet them, and also do the homework right away or read the stuff beforehand. All of that will develop something called a positive halo. And a positive halo will then have the teacher believing that you're one of the committed students. They'll start to treat you better. And then if you do falter, they won't look at you in a negative way. They'll look at you in a positive way, and they'll try to create a better environment. They'll like, go, you didn't do as well on this test. Can I, let's talk about it. And they might give you that extra help you need.
I was just thinking about like how much different it is for people that aren't white in, school, where like, it's sucks to say, but like, that's just kind of how America is,
Yeah.
Where white people stand and everything on, the status
No,
level.
so true.
That I'm like, well, like, how does that truly affect like the minority of kids that have that already in their head,
Well, I think it's a bigger uphill climb because you have a larger group looking down on them. And then also, if they come from, let's say, their parents have already bought into some of those negative beliefs that have been put on them by society, it creates a more downhill slide. This is why it is important to try to be around people who believe in you. And there are people who will believe in you at every level. I think what I've seen, that you can go into prisons and there are teachers in classrooms who believe in the prisoners, who wants them to get better. Those are the type of people you want to be around, not the people who are trying to pull you down. It's all, I think in our society, it's a little like lobsters in a barrel. Lobsters in a barrel, they never get out because as one tries to climb out, the other one pulls it down. And they just continually do that to each other, pulling the other ones down because they're trying to get out. So it's like every lobster for himself versus to know. So they never get out of the barrel, but as opposed to just being supporting each other and saying, you get out of the barrel and hopefully you can figure out a way to get me out later. And that would be a lot of faith and trust. But if you believe in somebody, they're more likely to behave that way. So expectations are powerful. We have to use them wisely. What you believe about others shapes how you treat them, and that treatment shapes their performance. So set your bar high with others, not criticism, but just high expectations.
I'm going to practice that.
That's excellent. Beware of negative labels, period. Jane Elliott, the teacher, remember how the students shrank under the inferior label. People often live to low expectations. Avoid labeling others as less capable or not leadership material. Everybody can be leadership material. Everybody can be capable. And what you have to try to do is figure out where that is and try to nurture that. Try to find that pearl and try to grow it. That's the oyster, right? And you get a grain of sand and it grows into a pearl, a beautiful thing. Treat everyone with equal respect. Fairness matters. Notice if you're unconsciously give more time, patience, or opportunities to those who you perceive as better, and commit to a level playing field. When I taught school, I used to say, here are the rules. Everyone has to follow them. I can't tell you how many people wanted to be treated special. Like, I need this, I need that. And I'd be like, you all have the same set of rules. That's what I expect from you. You don't have to do it. But and and a lot of people want so desperately to be treated special. They want to be
The golden child.
that golden child. And you know what? It doesn't help. And in fact, it hurts all the other students when you do that. Invest in someone's hidden potential. I think this is true. Don't just back the obvious stars. There are always those. I remember this one woman, Whitney. She came in and she interviewed us when I was doing a fellowship, and she interviewed for our fellowship, and she was so great. And I'm like, I told her during the interview, I go, the interview is going well when we start laughing and talking about other things. So she was an obvious star. But what was so interesting is there were others. Pay attention to quieter or overlooked individuals. Your belief in them may unlock the growth that they never imagined. Check your own biases. I have lots of biases, and I'm always trying to work on those. Ask yourself, am I expecting less because someone's background, appearance, or status? The way they dress, what they look like, maybe their language skills. Language skills actually bother me sometimes. So when I have to kind of cut through that with my own bias there. Awareness is the first step toward equity. So check your own biases. And by the way, someone who says they don't have biases, they have so many that they're blind, because we all have biases. That's just part of the human experience. And apply it to yourself. So this is the Galatea effect. Believe in yourself, believe in yourself, believe in yourself. It's not just about others. Expectations you hold for yourself can boost or limit your performance. Believe in your own capacity to rise. And let me tell you that if you grew up with parents who really didn't give you a lot of compliments, who really didn't push you, et cetera, I grew up with that. And, it's not that I love my mom. She's amazing, and she was good. So it's not negative. She wasn't a great cheerleader. That wasn't her thing. She wasn't a cheerleader, and I don't expect her to be. You know what? I developed it myself by getting pushed somewhere else. So if someone's not pushing you, be around people who will.
And honestly, I think about that and I'm like, that to me, it just shows that you're stronger than me. Because I'm like, I don't know if I didn't have that from my mom, if I would have been the same person as I am now and done all the things I've done. So that's why I'm like, oh, I mean, you just got to have it some way or another.
My mom didn't stand in my way either. She wasn't negative either.
Yeah.
So she didn't say you're not capable, etc. So it was more like, okay, you can do it, you're doing your thing. I'm busy over here. So it wasn't such I'm trying to not characterize her in a negative way. She was pretty amazing. But I do acknowledge that, these things can be different for different people. And so don't just limit it to your own parents. It's a little narrow. Like look around, and there are people that can really bolster you up. Could be an uncle, could be an aunt, could be friends, could be
even a teacher,
the cheer squad or the band or the teachers. Why don't we pay them more? 3 times, they should make 3 times what they make, and they should be exalted in society. They have the most important job.
They're not only just parenting, they're babysitting, and they're teaching on top of it.
And they're psychologists. I can't even tell you they're the best developmental psychologists. I'm continually impressed with them.
I always think about how the world would be different if some of the psychology stuff was implemented at a young age for all the kids in
they try to do it, but boy, that funding gets ripped out. That's the first to get ripped out every single time, and we're going through a spate of that right now. Well, unfortunately, this brings us right to the end. Thanks for joining us on Off the Couch. If you saw yourself in any of these patterns, you're not broken. You're just human. I hope this was inspirational to you. I really do, because it was inspirational to me. And when I think of the world that's going on right now, how prejudice is going up, and people are saying negative things about somebody because of their gender, because of their gender expression, because of their sexuality, because of the color of their skin, because of the language they speak, because of their socioeconomic status, because of their political affiliation. I could go on down the line. People are really dividing up and making things very negative. That is not helpful. That's probably an understatement. That is very harmful. That's blue eyes versus brown eyes. And if you go that direction, the next day things probably will be flipped. So if you start to look at yourself as part of humanity and connect with all of humanity, you're going to be much better off as a human being. Also, if you enjoyed today's episode, please share it with a friend. Don't forget to rate, review, or follow Off the Couch with Dr. Greg on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen. Links to the studies, go to the YouTube page, youtube.com/Dr. Greg. I put the link to the book, the Frontline Special. There's an explainer about Pygmalion effect, a couple of great studies, and a link to the book they wrote. I mean, oh my God, I got it all right there. Hit us up on socials at Ask Dr. Greg. Until next time, be present, be flexible, and be kind.